The afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows of Millie's diner, casting long shadows across the cracked vinyl booths. Chuck Norris sat alone in the corner booth, the same one he had claimed every Thursday for the past 3 years. The small roadside establishment sat on the outskirts of Austin, Texas, far enough from the city that most people passed it by without a second glance. That was exactly why Chuck liked it. At 68 years old, Chuck had long since stepped away from the spotlight. No more action movies, no more television shows. These days he lived quietly on his ranch, training horses and enjoying the peace he had earned after decades of fame. His beard had gone fully gray, but his eyes remained sharp and alert, taking in everything around him with the practiced awareness of a man who had spent his life being watched. The diner was nearly empty today. A pair of truckers hunched over, plates of meatloaf at the counter. An old farmer sipped coffee and worked on a crossword puzzle by the window. A young couple shared a milkshake in a booth near the door, too wrapped up in each other to notice the legend sitting nearby. Chuck sipped his black coffee and gazed out the window at the highway stretching out toward the horizon. He liked watching. The cars passed by, all those people rushing to somewhere important, while he sat still, going nowhere at all. "More coffee, sir?" Debbie Franklin stood beside his table, coffee pot in hand. She was in her late 40s with streaks of silver in her, brown hair and lines around her eyes that deepened when she smiled. She had been working at Millie's for over 20 years and knew every regular by name and order. "Thanks, Debbie," Chuck said, sliding his mug toward her. Debbie filled his cup with practiced ease. Chuck had noticed her hands trembling slightly. Today, something unusual for the steady-handed waitress. She had been watching him more carefully than normal, too, glancing his way every few minutes as if making sure he was still there. "How's that apple pie looking today?" Chuck asked. "Fresh out of the oven," Debbie said, but her usual cheerful tone sounded forced. "Want a slice?" "Maybe in a bit." Debbie nodded and moved away to check on the truckers at the counter. Chuck watched her go, noting the tension in her shoulders. Something was wrong. In his years of training and fighting, he had learned to read people, to sense when someone was carrying a burden. Debbie was carrying something heavy today. Chuck returned to his coffee and the worn paperback Western novel he had brought with him. He read the same page 3 times without absorbing a word, his mind drifting to the past. It had been 15 years since he had fully retired from public life. 15 years of quiet days and peaceful nights. Sometimes he missed the action, the rush of adrenaline, the sense of purpose. But mostly he was content. The bell above the door jingled as a man in a dark suit entered. He scanned the diner quickly, his gaze lingering on Chuck for just a second, too long before he took a seat at the counter. Chuck felt a familiar tingle at the base of his neck, an old warning system that had saved his life more than once. The man wasn't just looking, he was watching. Debbie approached Chuck's table again. "How about that pie now?" "No thanks," Chuck replied with a polite smile. "Just the check when you get a chance." Debbie nodded and walked back to the register. The man at the counter was watching her now, his fingers drumming on the Formica surface. When Debbie returned to Chuck's table, she placed the check face down in front of him. As she did, she discreetly slid a folded paper napkin beneath it. Their eyes met briefly, hers filled with urgency, his with quiet understanding. The message was clear. "Read this privately." Chuck waited until Debbie had moved away before he casually covered the napkin with his hand and slipped it into his lap. Under the table, shielded from view, he unfolded it with one hand. The napkin contained a message written in hurried blue ink. 47844 DGN, 1153214 W. May 24, 2025. "They're coming. Back. You're the only one who remembers. Humanity needs you one last time." Chuck stared at the words, reading them again and again. Something stirred in the back of his mind. A memory, or perhaps a dream. Images flashed before his eyes. A dark sky, filled with strange lights, the sound of alarms, the weight of responsibility. His heart began to pound in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The man at the counter stood up suddenly, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Chuck's body tensed, ready to move. But the man only pulled out his wallet, dropped, some bills on the counter, and walked out, giving Chuck one last meaningful look as he left. Chuck folded the napkin carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill under his coffee cup, far more than his coffee had cost. He stood up without a word, his mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done. As he walked toward the door, Debbie called out, "See you next Thursday, Mr. Norris?" Chuck paused with his hand on the door. "Thank you, Debbie," he said simply, leaving her question unanswered. Outside, the late afternoon sun warmed his face. Chuck walked to his old pickup truck and climbed in, sitting for a moment with his hands on the wheel. He pulled out the napkin and read the coordinates again. Nevada, about a day's drive from here. He started the engine and pulled onto the highway, heading west. As he drove, memories began to surface. Memories he shouldn't have of events that couldn't have happened. A life he never lived, or had he? Chuck drove through the setting sun, the flat Texas landscape gradually giving way to rolling hills. By nightfall, he had crossed into New Mexico. He stopped only for gas, his mind increasingly occupied with fragments of memory. A hidden facility deep underground. A command center. A star map with a red dot moving steadily toward Earth. Faces of people he knew but couldn't name. A battle that no one remembered. As midnight approached, Chuck pulled over at a small motel. In his room, he spread out a map and marked the coordinates from the napkin. Something was waiting for him there, something important. Something that explained the strange dreams he'd had for 15 years. The odd sense that his life as a martial artist and actor was somehow not the whole truth. Chuck lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 15 years, he felt alive again. Whatever was coming, whatever waited for him in Nevada, he would face it head on, because that's what Chuck Norris did. He didn't run from danger, he ran toward it. Chuck drove for 18 straight hours, stopping only for gas and coffee. The Nevada desert stretched out around him, vast and empty under the hot sun. His old pickup truck kicked up dust as he turned off the main highway onto a narrow dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. The GPS on his phone had stopped working an hour ago. Chuck pulled the napkin from his pocket and checked the coordinates again. According to his map, he was close. He drove slowly now, his eyes scanning the barren landscape for any sign of what he was looking for. After another 20 minutes, Chuck spotted it. A small metal shed standing alone in the desert. It looked abandoned, its metal walls rusted and weathered by years of sun and sand. He parked his truck and got out, the heat hitting him like a wall. Chuck approached the shed cautiously. There was no handle on the door, just a small panel with a handprint scanner that looked far too modern for the dilapidated structure. Without thinking, Chuck placed his palm against the scanner. A green light flashed, and the ground beneath him began to rumble. Chuck stepped back as the earth in front of the shed split open, revealing a ramp leading down into darkness. Lights flickered on along the sides of the ramp, illuminating a path deep underground. Chuck took a deep breath and walked down, the entrance sealing shut behind him. The ramp led to a long corridor with smooth metal walls. Chuck's footsteps echoed as he walked, guided by lights that turned on automatically ahead of him and shut off behind him. After about 5 minutes, he reached a heavy metal door with another handprint scanner. Again, Chuck placed his palm on the scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a large circular room filled with computers and screens. Dust covered everything, but as Chuck entered, the systems began to power up one by one. Screens flickered to life, showing maps, diagrams, and streams of data. "Welcome back, Commander Norris," said a female voice from hidden speakers. "It has been 5,473 days since your last visit." Chuck turned slowly, taking in the room. "Who are you?" he asked. A hologram appeared in the center of the room, a woman made of blue light, her form flickering slightly. "I am Alice, Artificial Logic Intelligence Computing Entity. I am the operating system for this facility and the Earth Defense Network." Chuck's head began to pound. Images flashed through his mind faster now, sitting in this very room, giving orders, looking at star maps, preparing for battle. I don't understand, Chuck said, rubbing his temples. I've never been here before. The memory suppression protocol was designed to be temporary, Alice explained. Your memories are returning because the protocol is being lifted. Please sit down, Commander. The process can be disorienting. Chuck sat in a chair that seemed to fit him perfectly. As soon as he did, a screen in front of him lit up showing a star map. A red dot pulsed as it moved steadily toward a blue dot. Earth. What is this? Chuck asked, though part of him already knew the answer. 15 years ago, Earth was attacked by an alien species we call the Krell, Alice said. They sent a scout force to assess our planet's defenses and resources. Under your command, Earth's forces defeated them. Chuck closed his eyes as memories flooded back. The battle in orbit around Earth. The ships they had built using recovered alien technology. The desperate plan that had worked against all odds. After the victory, the world's governments made a decision, Alice continued. Knowledge of the attack would cause global panic. They chose to suppress all memories of the event and disband the defense force, keeping only a skeleton crew of systems on standby. Why? Chuck asked. Why not prepare for their return? The governments believed the Krell would not return. They were wrong. Long-range sensors detected their main fleet entering our solar system 3 days ago. They will reach Earth in 72 hours. Chuck stood up suddenly, more memories clicking into place. The crew, he said. Where are they? All former crew. Members were given memory suppressants and returned to civilian life, Alice said. Only you were given the trigger code, embedded in your subconscious. When activated by the correct sequence of words, your memories would begin to return, and you would know to come here. The waitress, Chuck said. Debbie, she's one of us. Officer Deborah Franklin, communications specialist, Alice confirmed. She was assigned to monitor you and activate your trigger when necessary. Chuck walked to a control panel that felt familiar under his hands. We need to wake the others, he said. How many were there? 12 key personnel had memory triggers implanted, Alice said. I can activate them remotely. Chuck nodded. Do it, and show me what we're up against. A large screen on the wall displayed an image of space near Jupiter. A massive fleet of ships, hundreds of them, moved in perfect formation toward Earth. They were black and sleek, almost organic in design. The Krell main fleet, Alice said. Estimated time of arrival, 68 hours and counting. Chuck studied the image. Memories of the previous battle clear in his mind now. They had barely defeated a scout force of 5 ships. Now they faced hundreds. What about our ships? Chuck asked. The ones we built before. The fleet was placed in standby mode at hidden locations around Earth and in orbit, Alice replied. They can be reactivated. Chuck nodded. Begin reactivation protocols, and give me files on all 12 crew members. I need to know where they are and what they've been doing for 15 years. Alice complied, bringing up profiles on the screens. Around the room, Chuck recognized the faces immediately. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, the best minds Earth had to offer, now scattered across the globe, living ordinary lives with no memory of their true purpose. Commander, Alice said, there is something else you should know. The Krell learn from every encounter. They will have adapted their tactics based on their previous defeat. Chuck smiled for the first time since entering the facility. So have I, he said. I'm not the same man I was 15 years ago. He walked to the center of the room, standing tall. This is Commander Norris initiating Protocol Lazarus. Authorization code. November, Oscar, Romeo, Romeo, India, Sierra. The facility hummed, with renewed energy as systems fully activated. Lights brightened and more screens came to life around the room. Protocol Lazarus initiated, Alice confirmed, sending activation signals to all crew members now. Chuck sat down in the commander's chair, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once more. Somewhere out there, 12 people were about to remember who they really were. And somewhere beyond Jupiter, an alien fleet was coming to destroy everything he had sworn to protect. Show me our ships, Chuck said. The screen changed to show sleek vessels hidden in underwater bases, mountain hangars, and on the dark side of the moon. Earth's secret fleet waiting to be awakened. It's time to remind the Krell who they're dealing with, Chuck said quietly. No one threatens Earth while I'm around. Within 24 hours, they began to arrive. Chuck stood at the entrance to the underground facility, watching as vehicles pulled up one by one. Each person stepped out looking dazed and confused, but as soon as they saw Chuck, recognition dawned in their eyes. The first to arrive was Dr. Elizabeth Vaughn, a tall woman with graying red hair pulled back in a tight bun. For the past 15 years, she had been working as a high school science teacher in Oregon, never understanding why she felt drawn to study the stars in her free time. "Commander," she said, shaking Chuck's hand firmly. "I had the strangest dream last night, and then I woke up knowing I had to drive here. I didn't even know this place existed until today." "Welcome back, Doctor," Chuck said. "Your lab is waiting for you." Next came Jack Harper, a broad-shouldered man with a military bearing despite his civilian clothes. He had been running a small gym in Detroit, training fighters who never understood why their coach sometimes stared at the sky with a worried expression. "Good to see you, sir," Jack said, saluting automatically. "Though I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this. Last night I was closing up my gym, and now I remember commanding Earth's first space fighter squadron. Your pilots are being awakened as we speak," Chuck told him. "They'll join us within 48 hours. By noon, 6 of the 12 had arrived. Sam Rogers, a skinny man with wild hair and a perpetual look of distraction, had been designing advanced technology in his garage for years without knowing why. Now he moved through the facility, touching equipment like old friends. "It's all still here," Sam said with wonder. "And I've been dreaming about these designs for years. I even built some prototypes, though I never knew what they were for." At sunset, Debbie Franklin arrived, the same waitress who had passed Chuck the napkin. She looked different now, her posture straighter, her eyes sharper, the timid manner replaced by quiet confidence. "Officer Franklin reporting for duty," she said formally, then broke into a smile. "Sorry about all the mystery, Commander. I was only allowed to remember bits and pieces, enough to watch over you and recognize when the trigger needed to be activated." By midnight, all 12 key personnel had returned. They gathered in the main control room, each finding their old stations, as if they had never left. Chuck stood before them, looking at their faces, confused, excited, determined. "I know this is disorienting for all of you," Chuck said. "One day you're living normal lives. The next you remember you're part of Earth's secret defense force against alien invasion. But we don't have time for a gentle adjustment period. The Krell will reach Earth in less than 48 hours. Elizabeth raised her hand. "Commander, what exactly are we facing? My memories are still coming back in pieces." Chuck nodded to Alice, who projected an image of the Krell fleet in the center of the room. The ships moved in perfect harmony, like a single organism rather than individual vessels. "The Krell are a hive mind species," Chuck explained. "They travel the galaxy consuming resources and adding new biological and technological advantages to their collective. 15 years ago, they sent 5 scout ships to assess Earth. We destroyed 4 and captured technology from the 5th before it self-destructed. I remember the tech," Sam said excitedly. "We reversed engineered it to build our own fleet. The energy weapons, the shield technology, it was like nothing we'd ever seen. But now they're coming back with hundreds of ships," Jack pointed out. "How are we supposed to fight that? Even with our hidden fleet, we're outnumbered at least 10 to 1. Chuck smiled. "Because we have something they don't, something that gave us the edge last time. Elizabeth, do you remember your discovery?" Elizabeth's eyes widened as the memory came back to her. "The Krell psychology study," she said. "I analyzed their communication, patterns from the captured ship. Their hive mind makes them incredibly efficient but also predictable. They can't comprehend individual action that doesn't benefit the collective. In other words," Chuck said, "they can't understand why a single human would sacrifice themselves to save others. They can't understand heroism, creativity, or improvisation. Every move they make is calculated for maximum efficiency." "And humans are messy," Sam added with a grin. We do things that make no logical sense. We take risks. We improvise. Exactly, Chuck said. Last time we won because we did the unexpected. This time they'll be ready for our conventional tactics. But they've never faced me directly. What's the plan, Commander? Debbie asked. We have two objectives, Chuck said. First, we need to reactivate and crew our hidden fleet to protect Earth's population centers. Jack, that's your mission. Get our ships in the air and our pilots ready for battle. Jack nodded firmly. Yes, sir. Second, Chuck continued, we need to strike at the heart of their fleet. The Krell operate from a central mothership that coordinates the entire hive. Elizabeth, Sam, and I will lead a small team on a stealth mission to infiltrate that ship and disrupt their command structure. The room fell silent as the magnitude of the mission sank in. That's a suicide mission, Jack said quietly. Maybe, Chuck acknowledged. But if we don't try, Earth doesn't stand a chance. He walked to a large screen showing Earth, a small blue dot against the vastness of space. I didn't ask for this responsibility, he said. None of us did. We were all happy in our new lives. But we're the only ones who know what's coming, the only ones who can stop it. Chuck turned to face his team. We have 46 hours to prepare. I need each of you at your best. Remember your training. Remember your purpose. Earth is counting on us even if they don't know it. The team dispersed to their stations, the facility humming with renewed activity. Chuck remained looking at the screen, watching the red dots of the Krell fleet moving steadily closer. Debbie approached him, concern on her face. Do you really think we can do this again? She asked quietly. Chuck's expression was firm. We have to, he said simply. There's no one else. As night fell over the Nevada desert, the underground facility blazed with light and purpose. Ships were awakened from their long slumber. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Plans were made, and discarded and made again. And at the center of it all stood Chuck Norris, the unlikely commander of Earth's last defense, preparing once more to face an enemy from beyond the stars. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of activity. Deep below the Nevada desert, Chuck's team worked without rest, preparing for humanity's greatest challenge. Above ground, the world continued as normal, completely unaware of the danger, approaching from space. Chuck stood in the hangar bay looking at the small stealth ship that would carry his team to the Krell mothership. The vessel was shaped like an arrowhead, its black surface absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Sam had spent the last day modifying it with their most advanced technology. She'll get us there, Sam said, joining Chuck by the ship. His hands were stained with grease and dark circles hung under his eyes. I've added a cloaking system based on the Krell tech we captured. They won't see us coming. Good work, Chuck said, patting Sam on the shoulder. Get some rest. We leave in 10 hours. In the command center, Jack coordinated with pilots around the world as they remembered their true purpose and made their way to hidden launch sites. On screens around the room, dots of light showed their hidden fleet awakening. Ships concealed in mountain hangars, beneath the ocean, and on the dark side of the moon. 53 ships ready for launch, Jack reported. Another 20 should be operational within hours. Pilots are arriving at their stations, but many won't make it in time. We'll have to manage with skeleton crews, Chuck said. Elizabeth, how are the weapon systems? Elizabeth looked up from her computer. The energy cannons have been in storage for 15 years, but they're working better than expected. The shield generators need more time, though. We're at about 70% capacity. It will have to be enough, Chuck said. The Krell will enter Earth orbit in less than 24 hours. Debbie entered the room with a worried expression. Commander, we have a problem. Global communications are starting to fail. The Krell are jamming our signals. Chuck nodded grimly. They're starting their attack run. They want to isolate us, cut off communication before they arrive. He turned to address the entire room. This is it, people. No more preparation time. Jack, launch all available ships now. Get them in defensive positions around major population centers. Jack nodded and began barking orders into his headset. Throughout the facility, alarms sounded as the base shifted to full battle readiness. Elizabeth, Sam, Debbie, Chuck said. With me. We launch in 1 hour. As they hurried toward the hangar, the ground above them shook. A technician ran up to Chuck with a tablet showing news feeds from around the world. "Sir, civilians are noticing." "Something," the tech said. "Strange lights in the sky, communications outages. Governments are claiming it's a solar flare, but people are starting to panic." Chuck looked at the feeds, crowds gathering in cities, looking up at the sky in confusion and fear. "They'll know the truth soon enough," he said quietly. "Let's make sure we're there to protect them when they do." In the hangar, their small team made final preparations. The stealth ship, named Shadow, stood ready for launch. 4 crew members would make the dangerous journey to the heart of the Krell fleet: Chuck, Elizabeth, Sam, and Debbie. "Remember the plan," Chuck told them as they loaded the last of their equipment. "We approach under cloak, dock with the mothership, using the access codes we captured last time, and make our way to the central brain. Plant the disruptor device and get out before it detonates." "And if we can't get out?" Elizabeth asked. Chuck met her gaze steadily. "Then Earth still has a fighting chance without their command ship." They boarded the Shadow in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Chuck took the pilot's seat, his hands moving over the controls with practiced ease as memories of flight. Training returned to him. The ship hummed to life around them. "Launch bay doors opening," said a voice over the comm. "Godspeed, Commander." The ceiling of the hangar slid open, revealing the night sky above. Chuck guided the Shadow upward, accelerating rapidly into the atmosphere. Behind them, across the globe, the rest of Earth's hidden fleet was launching, rising from the ocean, emerging from mountain hideaways, powering up on the dark side of the moon. "Cloak engaged," Sam reported as they left the atmosphere. "We're invisible to their sensors." The blackness of space spread out before them, beautiful and terrifying. And there, just beyond the moon's orbit, waited the Krell fleet. Hundreds of ships moving in perfect formation, their black hulls gleaming in the sunlight. At the center floated the mothership, a massive structure 3 miles across, shaped like a giant octopus with tentacle-like appendages extending outward. "My God," whispered Debbie. "There are so many of them." Chuck set their course directly for the mothership. "Stay calm," he said. "Remember, they think in terms of large-scale attacks. They won't be looking for a single small ship." As they approached, they could see Earth's defense fleet moving to intercept the Krell, tiny points of light against the vastness of the enemy armada. Jack's voice came over the comm, breaking through the Krell jamming. "Fleet in position, Commander. We're ready to engage on your mark." Chuck looked back at his team, then at the approaching alien fleet. "Tell them to hold until we're in position," he ordered. "We only get one shot at this." The Shadow slipped silently through the Krell formation, passing so close to enemy ships that they could see details of their alien construction through the viewports. No alarms sounded, no weapons tracked them. The cloak was working. "Approaching the mothership," Chuck announced. "Sam, get ready with those access codes." The massive mothership loomed before them, growing larger by the second. Its surface was covered with strange patterns that pulsed with inner light. Sam bent over his console, transmitting the captured codes that would fool the ship into opening a docking bay. "It's working," he said excitedly. "They're opening a maintenance port." On the lower quadrant, Chuck guided their ship toward the opening, a small, dark spot on the vast hull of the mothership. Behind them, the Krell fleet began to spread out, preparing to descend on Earth. "Jack," Chuck said into the comm, "engage the enemy. Keep them busy while we complete our mission." In the distance, flashes of light erupted as Earth's fleet opened fire on the Krell ships. The battle for humanity had begun. Chuck guided the Shadow into the docking port of the mothership, setting down gently in an alien hangar. The interior was dimly lit with a reddish glow, the walls covered in the same pulsing patterns as the outside. "We're in," Chuck said, unstrapping from his seat. "Suit up and arm yourselves. From here on, we move fast." They pulled on sleek black armor and checked their weapons, energy pistols based on Krell technology. Chuck looked at each member of his team, brave humans about to venture into the heart of an alien hive. "No matter what happens," he said, "remember what we're fighting for." The inside of the Krell mothership felt alive. The walls pulsed with a strange red light and the floor beneath their feet seemed to hum. Chuck led the way, moving quickly through twisted corridors that branched like veins in a giant body. Sam followed close behind, holding a small device that beeped softly. "The central brain should be this way," Sam whispered, pointing down a large tunnel. About half a mile deeper into the ship. They moved in silence, weapons ready. So far they had encountered no Krell, but Chuck knew their luck wouldn't last. The four humans pressed forward, trying to ignore the strange sounds that echoed through the ship, clicks and whirs that sounded almost like distant conversation. "The Krell aren't individuals like us," Elizabeth explained quietly as they walked. "What we're inside isn't just a ship, it's one giant organism. The Krell are like cells in a body, each with a purpose but no independent thought. Which is why attacking the brain will cripple them," Debbie added. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. As they paused to check their direction, a sound came from the left tunnel, the clicking, insect-like noise growing louder. Chuck motioned for them to hide against the walls. A moment later, 3 Krell drones marched past. They walked on 4 legs, their bodies smooth and black like polished stone. Where faces should have been, they had only smooth surfaces with small glowing red spots. Mechanical arms extended from their torsos, carrying tools or weapons. The team held their breath until the drones passed. Once the sound faded, Chuck signaled them forward again. "They didn't even look for us," Sam whispered. "They don't expect anyone to be here. They can't imagine a small team would invade their mothership," Chuck replied. "It's not efficient, it's not logical, that's our advantage." They continued deeper into the ship. The tunnels grew larger, the pulsing on the walls more intense. Finally, they reached a massive door that blocked their path. "This is it," Sam said, checking his device. "The central chamber. The brain will be inside." Chuck examined the door. There was no obvious way to open it. No handles, no control panels. "Ideas?" he asked. Sam pulled a small box from his pack and attached it to the wall beside the door. "This should broadcast the access codes we captured. If we're lucky, the ship will think we're maintenance drones." The box hummed, lights flashing on its surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly the massive door began to slide open. Beyond lay a sight none of them were prepared for. The chamber was enormous, at least 100 yards across and just as high. In the center floated what could only be described as a brain, a massive organ-like structure suspended in a clear liquid. It pulsed with the same red light that ran through the ship's walls. Thousands of cables and tubes connected to it from all directions. "There it is," Elizabeth breathed. The central intelligence of the Krell fleet. Surrounding the brain, dozens of drones moved about, tending to the tubes and cables. None of them seemed to notice the small team of humans at the doorway. "We need to get the disruptor device as close to the brain as possible," Sam said, pulling a cylinder from his pack. "It needs to be within 20 feet to work effectively." Chuck surveyed the room, noting the patterns of the drones. "There," he said, pointing to a walkway that extended close to the central brain. "We can place it there, but we'll need a distraction to clear those drones." "I'll do it," Debbie said firmly. "I can draw them to the other side of the chamber." Chuck shook his head. "Too dangerous, we stick together." "There's no time to argue," Debbie insisted. "Look." She pointed to a display on the wall showing the battle outside. Earth's fleet was engaged with the Krell ships, bright flashes marking explosions in the darkness of space. The human ships were fighting bravely, but they were clearly outmatched. Several had already been destroyed. "Jack and the others can't hold out much longer," Debbie said. "We need to do this now." Chuck knew she was right. He nodded reluctantly. "Be careful. Create your distraction, then get back to the shadow. We'll meet you there." Debbie checked her weapon, then slipped away, moving around the edge of the chamber toward the far side. The others waited, watching as she positioned herself behind some equipment. Then she fired her energy pistol at a cluster of tubes near the ceiling. The effect was immediate. Alarms blared throughout the chamber. Most of the drones rushed toward the damaged area, leaving the path to the brain temporarily clear. "Now," Chuck ordered. He, Sam, and Elizabeth dashed across the chamber toward the walkway. They were halfway there when a drone spotted them and let out a high-pitched sound. 3 more drones turned and started moving toward them. "Keep going," Chuck shouted to Sam and Elizabeth. "I'll hold them off." Chuck turned to face the approaching drones, his energy pistol ready. He fired quickly, hitting the first drone in its center. The creature fell, its legs collapsing beneath it. The others continued forward, raising weapon-like appendages. Chuck ducked as energy beams shot over his head. He rolled to the side and fired again, taking down a second drone. The third got too close. Chuck lashed out with a powerful roundhouse kick, sending the drone crashing into a nearby console. On the walkway, Sam and Elizabeth had reached the position closest to the brain. Sam was setting up the disruptor device, his fingers working quickly to activate it. "Hurry," Elizabeth urged, watching as more drones began to notice them. Chuck fought his way to the walkway, joining them just as Sam finished setting the device. "It's done," Sam announced. "Timer set for 5 minutes. That should give us enough time to get back to the ship." The 3 turned to run back the way they had come, but found their path blocked by a line of drones. On the far side of the chamber, they could see Debbie surrounded by more drones, fighting desperately. "We need to help her," Elizabeth said. Chuck made a quick decision. "Sam, get Elizabeth back to the shadow. I'll get Debbie." Before they could argue, Chuck charged toward the drones, blocking their path. He moved with incredible speed and precision, his body remembering decades of martial arts training. Kicks and punches connected with alien bodies, clearing a path for Sam and Elizabeth to escape. "Go," Chuck shouted to them. "That's an order." Sam grabbed Elizabeth's arm and pulled her toward the exit. Chuck fought his way across the chamber, toward Debbie, who was still holding her own against the drones but clearly tiring. The disruptor device beeped steadily, counting down the minutes until detonation. 3 minutes remained. Chuck reached Debbie and pulled her behind a console as energy beams cut through the air around them. "The others?" she asked, breathing hard. "On their way to the ship," Chuck said. "We need to move now." They made a run for the exit, dodging attacks from the increasingly agitated drones. The entire ship seemed to be aware of them now. The walls pulsed faster, and the humming grew louder. As they reached the corridor outside the chamber, the ship shuddered violently. Emergency lights began flashing. "They're trying to eject the disruptor," Chuck realized. "We triggered some kind of immune response." "Will it work?" Debbie asked as they ran. "No," Chuck said grimly. "That device is going to detonate no matter what they do." They sprinted through the corridors, retracing their steps toward the hangar where the shadow waited. 1 minute remained on the disruptor's timer. Chuck and Debbie burst into the hangar, to find Sam and Elizabeth already aboard the shadow, its engines running. They raced up the ramp, which closed behind them as soon as they were aboard. "Get us out of here," Chuck ordered, strapping into his seat. Sam engaged the engines, and the small ship lifted off. They sped out of the hangar and away from the mothership, pushing the engines to their limit. Behind them, the Krell mothership began to convulse, its tentacle-like appendages writhing in space. A bright light built at its center, growing more intense by the second. "Brace for impact," Chuck warned. Kacker, mothership exploded in a massive ball of light and energy. The shockwave hit the shadow, sending it spinning through space. For a moment it seemed like they might break apart, but Chuck managed to stabilize the ship. When they looked back, the Krell mothership was gone. In its place was only debris, spreading outward in a slowly expanding cloud. All around, the Krell fleet had stopped moving, the ships drifting aimlessly without their central intelligence to guide them. "We did it," Sam said in disbelief. Earth's fleet moved in, easily picking off the now helpless Krell ships. On the comm, they could hear Jack's voice filled with triumph. "Commander? Commander Norris, do you read me?" Chuck smiled, feeling the weight of command lift from his shoulders. "We read you, Jack. Mission accomplished. The Krell are neutralized." As the shadow turned toward Earth, the blue planet shining like a jewel against the darkness of space, Chuck Norris looked at his small team, the brave humans who had saved their world. "Let's go home," he said simply.